Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the hearing to order. We begin by acknowledging that we're in Treaty 1 territory in the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Ron Merritt. I'll be your chairperson this morning. Introducing the panel members is Marcel, Maurice Therian, and to his left is Brett McIntyre. Representing the city of Winnipeg is Trish Caldwell, and our recording secretary is Kelsey Harrison. We'll be hearing application for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested has been described in each application, and we will limit discussions to those matters. The statements that the applicant or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn in testimony, and anybody speaking in these matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent along with the city administration. We make the decisions based on the evidence provided at the hearing and issue a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision in respect to application may be appealed to the municipal board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to application for exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the board's order. In respect to the hearing this morning, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. It will be then the assessor's testimony followed by questions and other applicants may have, and then it will be the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each party will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all evidence about the application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket this morning. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and are part of the public record. I'll ask our secretary to swear in the assessor and to swear in Mr. Smith or either affirm him.
Could you please state your name? Trish Caldwell. And do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Could you please state your name?
Trevor Smith.
And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, I think we've officially opened the hearing, so we're going to have a little recess until everything is ironed out, so we'll shut down the camera. All right, we'll call the hearing back to order, and we will proceed with the docket. So we'll go to Steele Avenue, 1579 Steele. So whenever you're ready, you can take us through this first item.
File number 19-520, roll number 03-07-151-0000. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value, of $3,058,000, and I have a recommendation to make for this property.
All right. Is it somewhere, or is there a handout?
I have a handout, yes.
All right. Thank you. Alrighty.
And the recommendation is to reduce the rent to $5.77 for a new value of $2,932,000.
Mr. Smith, are you in agreement?
In this case, we are not, no.
Okay. You can continue with your presentation.
Certainly. This is a one-story building with an effective year of 1966, wall heights of 19 and 20 feet. It's zoned M2 and has a land plan area of 2.42. On page 2, you'll see there is a sale in 2017. This was a multi-roll sale, so this was one of the parcels in the sale. And you'll see some exterior photographs on page 3 as well as an overhead view. And on page 4, we have our capitalization rate chart. 60% of our cap rates in industrial fall between 6.34 and 7.8%. And on page 5 for our income workup, we have a total leasable area of 40,576 square feet. We have a vacancy loss of 2.5%, expenses of 2%, $3.75 for shortfall rate, a cap rate of 7.5%, bringing us to our value of $3,058,000. And on the following page 6, I have some rent comparables. Comparables are mostly the same vintage, with rents ranging from $5.17 to a high of $7.08 to support our new recommendation of $5.77. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank you. Mr. Smith, questions of the assessor?
Yes, just a couple. Looking at the rent comparables on page number 6. So the new rent is $577. That was recommended.
Yes.
Okay. I know these were done a little while ago, so probably not had, well, they'd be submitted prior to any corrections that I would have offered recently. The 50 Furniture Park lease, that is a non-arm's length between related companies, is it not? With
I wasn't
Palliser?
aware of that.
Okay, that is a Palliser Furniture, and that's an internal lease for them. The 1750 Inkster Park lease, that is Artis Reed, who is the owner there, and they had done an extensive renovation to the property where they put in a whole new loading court and new loading bays on the front on Inkster, and renovations throughout the building. Would that typically drive the rent higher?
It could, yes.
Okay. And then just looking at the last one there, the 1436 Chevrier, that's one of our properties on the docket today.
Yes.
And that's essentially a 75-year lease back, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then my last question is with regard to the sale brochure. The city received a sale questionnaire from the owner.
Correct.
Do you recall what the value that was placed on the property was?
I don't remember exactly
Okay.
what was on this.
Would anybody object if I handed out that information?
All right.
Oh, sorry. One more. Thanks.
Thank you.
So it was, the 4.1 was a multi-roll sale, which was two adjacent properties, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so the allocation for this property of that was $2,040,000?
Yes.
Okay, and the appraisal that was done at the time, and I have a little bit more information, it comes to $2,050,000, $2,258,000, actually $2,251,000, less the cost of roof repair, which was a little over $192,000, so they came to $2,058,000.
Yes.
Okay, that's all of my questions, thank you.
Do you have any questions, Tristan, in regards to that information?
The buyer was a tenant at the property.
Yes, oh, sorry, yes, they were a tenant in the property.
So it's not an arm's length sale?
It is arm's length, but it was not on the open market as such, in that they acquired it directly from the owner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Therian?
Just to make sure I understood, your original workup was model,
Yes, please.
and so you just made an adjustment on the rent.
Yes.
But that's your review now, okay? I think that's all I have, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
I have no questions.
Do you know offhand, I guess, Mr. Smith, what was registered in land titles for the property?
Well,
I mean, this is a questionnaire.
yes.
But I mean, you know, and I've often said this, I guess the land titles wants their pound of flesh in regards to market value.
Right.
So was there a
I did not,
inquiry?
I'm afraid that I did not hold the land title, but I believe that the allocation for this property, because if there were two side-by-side properties, 1575 and 1579 seal, they're adjacent, that formed the 4.1. So they allocated $2,040,000 to this one, which I believe is what was registered at land titles. And the balance was for 1575.
You had probably some questions in regards to the presentation by
I
the
have
city?
no questions.
Okay. Mr. Therian? Questions of the assessor? Mr. McIntyre?
I have no questions.
You came in with a recommendation, I guess, and it is probably reflected in regards to market rents.
Yes.
Okay. And that's why, because everything else is pretty close to the same cap rate?
Yes.
Okay. So you did a further analysis in regards to the model generated value?
Yes.
And you concluded 577?
Correct, yes.
Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So just with regard to the sale questionnaire, so I completed my brief and submitted it prior to seeing this sale questionnaire online. It wasn't downloaded for some reason at that point for us. We did look at it subsequently. So the property, as mentioned, was purchased along with the adjacent property, and the new owner was a tenant in the property at the time. So in that way, they were acquiring it directly from the owner. So there is some, obviously it is arm's length, but it's there is the element of it not having been marketed on the open market, etc. They didn't put it up for sale as such. They were going to, and then the owner, or rather the tenant, approached them and purchased the two properties as noted. the appraised value, so that, their allocation is $2,040,000. Now, that's one thing, that's what they decided to assign to it in their splitting of the overall purchase price. But in order to purchase the property, they had to get an appraisal done, which they did, and they submitted to the city. The market value that was determined for the property on an income basis was $2,251,000, less the cost of roof repair, which was $192,600. So they came down to $2,058,000. Now, our market value that we arrived at, having gone through it independently prior to this, was $2,157,000. Now, I believe that they have gone through the repair of the roof at this point, so that I believe that has been addressed. It's interesting where our market value fell in relation to both their independent appraisal at the time of purchase and what they assigned to it as far as the value themselves. So let's go through it relatively quickly here. We have building built in 1962 and 1974, 2.3 acres, relatively low land to plan area ratio at 2.47 to 1. And we have an external wall height of 17 feet is what was indicated to us in looking through the material on the property. Photos are shown beginning on page 2. You can see that it is of its vintage, so a section of it is that lower height. And we have a wood frame building in the initial part of the property as well. It is a manufacturing facility, not storage warehouse, and you can see the basics of the property as shown there. The loading for the property is located at both the rear of the site, and then there's some smaller grade level doors on the east side of the property. A bit of dated office included. So let's run through the valuation. So as of the valuation date, it was owner occupied, no lease in place. So we are looking to the market for an appropriate rental rate. Looking at our lease comps on page number 10, you can see that they're all between 2016 and 2018 with one exception. And we tried to find properties that were of a significant size in relation to the subject. We wanted them to be in a similar size range, similar age if possible. And the wall height, we have 17 feet, the city is 19 to 20, so bit of a range in the comps that we have there. As you can see, our rental rate comps range between $4.50 up to $5.25 for significantly newer properties built in '79, smaller area, etc. In fact, most of these are smaller than the subject. The one that two that are closest in size, 1725 Inkster, is a significantly better property with better loading, higher wall height. It's a storage warehouse. And then we have 590 Berry, which has a similar wall height. It is a little larger, and the rent there was, for both of those, was $4.50 a square foot. Looking at the vintage and layout of the subject, I feel that $4.50 was appropriate. I'm not going to run through the rest of the information here in great detail. Being owner occupied, in Fort Garry, we used vacancy rates. We agreed to the vacancy rate of the city at 2.5%. Our expense allowance, you gentlemen have heard numerous times. I'm happy to answer questions on it, but I'm not going to present. Our overall expense allowance is 7%. And the shortfall amount we're in agreement on at $375. So when we cap our net operating income of $161,761 at 7.5%, we come to $2,157,000. Now, the addenda materials just include the I&E, some supportive decisions, and I presented the sale questionnaire, so I am happy to answer any questions that you gentlemen might have.
I thank you, sir. Questions of the applicant?
Yeah, just, on page 10, your rental comparison. I think they're mostly in northwest Winnipeg. The subject is in Fort Garry.
It is, yes. We did not have any rents of a significant size in that area that would be comparable to the subject.
Right, so if you're basing your rent on these comparables, knowing that Fort Garry typically can command higher rents in southwest Winnipeg?
It certainly can in many cases it does command higher rent, but it is dependent on the property, of course.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Therian?
Yeah, just on your comment of $2,251,000, just to go over that again. So that was you mentioned the declared value as far as you're assuming is $2,040,000 at land titles.
Correct.
But then you've got this 2,251. I'm just trying to get better understanding.
Right, so in the sale questionnaire there, the agreed upon price was $2,040,000, and that again was the split of the 4.1 between 1579 and 1575. So that's what they allocated to this property. They're very similar in nature and similar in size. If you go down to number 5 there, it will indicate was a market appraisal report done at the time of sale? Yes. What was the value? $2,058,000. They did provide that in that they sent it in to the city at that time, and the actual income approach to value did develop $2,058,000. However, that was $2,251,000 less the cost of roof repair, which you can see at the bottom here at number 16. So it came down to $2,058,000.
Okay, that's the only question I had.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre?
Just one on the sales mailer, the second page. There's a $2 million first mortgage on the property?
That is what they're indicating, yes, from BDC.
And that's the same amount as portioning for the sale?
That's correct. That's, it looks like they received 100% financing from BDC at an above market rate of 4.9%. So I think BDC obviously is the Business Development Bank of Canada, and their mandate essentially is to encourage business development, so they do lending at higher levels of the overall value but they accommodate for that somewhat in the interest rate that they apply.
Even though
100%
they had
is
an
unusual.
appraisal?
Pardon me?
Even though they had an appraisal?
Well, again, this is, it's a new client of mine. I'm not involved in any way in their financing. This is simply what they indicated. So the appraisal of $2,058,000, I guess they're quite confident in the viability of this business in lending at that level.
Okay, that was my only question.
I thank you. Mr. Smith, just a couple small questions.
Yes.
The owner that is there now,
Yes.
he was renting there before?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you know what rent he was paying or anything like that?
I do not know.
Okay. And do you know how long he was there?
I'm afraid I don't. This is a newer client for me, so I did not have that information. They approached me after their purchase, so I didn't have any background. I believe they'd been there for some time, and in fact, the city may have that information for you.
The other thing is, there were some roof repairs, $192,000.
That was what their quote was at the time.
Their quote.
Yes.
And when was that? Was that prior to buying it or after they bought it, or, and was the work done?
They would have got the quote prior to the acquisition of the property, and then I believe the work was done subsequent to that, following.
So that would be
acquisition.
reflected probably in the sale price then?
That's right. It's reflected in both the $2,040,000 allocation as well as the $2,058,000 from the independent appraisal. Well, you would add it on once it had been completed.
So basically, the argument is market rents and non-recoverable?
Correct.
All right, summation, if you want. Okay, Mr. Smith?
No, that's fine.
Okay. We'll go on to 154 Fairmont Road, whenever you're ready.
File number 19-764, roll number 14062879100. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $2,823,000, and I have a recommendation for this property.
Okay, do you have a handout?
I do not.
You do not?
No.
So...
If you would turn to page 6, I can give you the breakdown.
Yeah, okay.
So what
Start off with the gross
Yes. Yeah. so-
and lead us through it.
Sure, okay. So we have leasable square foot
Or,
area.
let me just interrupt. Mr. Smith, are you aware of the recommendation?
I am.
And are you in agreement?
I am.
Okay, give us probably,
I can give you the what I've changed and the
yeah,
new
okay,
value?
yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you can see there's a vacancy loss of 3.5%. I've increased the vacancy to 8%.
What about, Trish, what about gross rates? Gross rates the same? Or
Yes, yeah.
Gross rates? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
they're the same, okay. Okay, continue on,
So
sorry.
that brings the net operating income to 174,581. And to that, we're applying a 6.75% cap rate.
Give us the NOI, okay?
174,581.
Value?
2,586,000.
Mr. Smith, are you in agreement?
We are in agreement with that value, yes.
Panel members, any questions arising from the recommendation?
Yeah, well, what's the historical vacancy rate on this property?
Mr. Smith can explain that.
Just briefly?
Yeah, they had a vacancy of 3,200 square feet for a number of years, including at the valuation date.
Okay, that's where you made your adjustment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
And I have no questions.
I don't think there's any need for summation. So it's accepted, so we'll go on to Edison.
I also have a recommendation for this one.
All right. You have a handout?
I do.
Thank you. All right, you can take us through the recommendation.
Okay. File number 19-640, roll number 04-000-345500. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $1,055,000. And my recommendation, you'll see on the handout, we've decreased the rent to $4.64 and increased the cap rate to 7.10. There's also a surplus land rate. It was previously 96,000, and we reduced that to 48,000. For a total of 710,000.
I thank you. Mr. Smith, are you in agreement?
We are in agreement with the final market value, yes.
Okay, I thank you. Mr. Therian, any questions?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
No, I have no questions.
Okay, so be it. We'll go on to Ravenhurst Street, 399. Whenever you're ready.
File number 19-1520, roll number 09-01-0318-000. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $2,959,000. And I have a recommendation for this property to reduce the rent from $6.97 to $6.25. And to increase the cap rate from 6.5% to 7%. For a new value of $2,460,000.
Mr. Smith?
We are in agreement with the final market value.
Mr. Therian, any questions?
No, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
I have no questions.
Okay. Paquin Road, number 25, whenever you're ready.
File number 19-569, roll number 0605-3125-100. For the roll year 2020, we have an assessed value of $4,075,000. This is a 1- and 2-story building built between 1988 and 1993. Wall heights 20 and 25 feet, zoned M2, and has a land plan area of 2.38.
You have a recommendation on this one?
I do not.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. We just want to know. Okay. Continue on, sorry.
You'll see there is one lease in place on page 2. On page 3, you can see some exterior photos of the property. And on page 4, you can see the overhead view of the whole property. Page 6. On our income workup, we have a total leasable area of 45,660 square feet at $6.17. Vacancy loss at 2.5%, 2% expenses, $3.75 shortfall rate, cap rate of 6.5%, bringing us to our value of $4,075,000. And on page 7, I have some rent comparables. These are larger properties, not in the subject neighborhood. I'm looking for similar wall heights. We have similar wall heights. Rents are ranging from $5.95 to $8 per square foot to support our table rate of $6.17. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, questions?
That's just a couple. The 122 Paquin, I'm sorry, looking at page number 7, your lease comparables there, the 122 Paquin Road, that property has a significant size site with exterior storage, I believe, does it not?
Like,
Much larger land
violent,
area
it is,
ratio.
it does, yes.
Okay. The Kernaham property, that would be the former Palliser distribution center that became multi-tenant, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and to my knowledge, they had either gross or semi-gross leases in there over time. Has that been vetted, the $8 rate?
As far as I know, this is a net lease.
Bowman's Creek property, somewhat newer than the subject with high ceiling.
Yes.
Sorry. I'm not sure if I'll leave it at that, that's fine. Those are all of my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Therian, questions of the assessor?
Yes, going on page 2. What can you tell us about that sale in October of 2007? Do you know anything about it?
To be honest, I did not look into this sale, because of the age of it.
Okay, so we don't have that.
No, I don't.
And what about the lease that we see here at $6 with Kraus Global, and that seems to be the full size of the building? Am I
Correct.
Yeah, is that correct?
Yes.
Any information on that? It's a little different from your, I guess it's a model rent that you've used?
We've used model, so they're coming in, they have a contract rent at $6 per square foot.
Okay. The mailer here. If I look at the revenue on page 10, the income is 267, you're at 281. Now, I'm assuming your vacancy's taken off already, and I don't know how they've worked this, but any comment? And have you examined the mailers and compared them to the model?
Yes, I looked at them. I feel that we would remove some of the items from the mailer, like interest income and financing and mortgage, asset management fees and leasing commissions.
Did you try to rework these figures in relation to your NOI?
I did not, I just,
You did not.
I was just looking to see how it compared.
Okay, that's all I had there, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
I thank you. Mr. McIntyre?
Yeah, I have no questions.
No. Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So, just with relation to, start with the rent for the subject property. Kraus Global was put in as a tenant, start date of October 1, 2017, with a 5-year lease term at the $6 a square foot. So virtually at the valuation date. So the issue essentially is $6 a square foot market rent. Now, I certainly believe that it is. This is a property that is managed by Stevenson, so there was significant effort putting in and the lease terms that were agreed to. So they ultimately settled on a lease rate of $6 per square foot. And if you go through the income expense mailer that was sent in, and I did not go through and adjust any NOI in looking at this, since we're not. When we look at the expenses, we're looking at them over time. We're not looking at a single point in time, so it would be unfair to load a single year with all of the expenses that appear. But I think if you look at the income and expense form, probably the easiest way to do that is to look at page 10 of the city's brief. I think it is instructive. The non-recoverable expenses are shown halfway down the page. So these are the items that are not recovered from the tenant under the lease terms for this particular property. Now, in this case, they have management fees that are not recovered from this particular tenant. Now, that's an unusual circumstance. Not going to put a lot of weight on that. Also in this case, given the ownership and the size of them, they also have asset management fees. Again, that's somewhat unusual, and we do believe they should be included, but we're not stressing that as a significant aspect. However, we have professional fees here of over $3,000. As the property was leased in this year, there were leasing commissions of just under $38,000. We had a marketing line item that was applied. There was a tenant inducement of $7,500 that was provided. And then, of course, we don't include either mortgage interest or financing fees in any of our calculations. But as you can see, for this particular year, the non-recoverables add up significantly. Now, we don't apply those to a single year. You would spread that out over time, and taking this as a good indicator of market, as you have leasing that occurs generally within a 3 to 5 year span. I think this is pretty indicative that the 5% that we're asking for to be reinstituted is certainly supported by the market evidence. Now, looking at the subject and the market value, let's look at my page number 1. The prior assessment property was confirmed at $3,278,000. There was a different lease in place at that time, and at a significantly lower rental rate. It was confirmed. We appealed this to the municipal board. Our market value comes to $3,335,000 based on the parameters that we'll run through here quickly. Basically, we're looking at a jump of over $800,000, well, around $800,000, 24.3% over an appealed value from 2018. We don't think this is supported in the market. Our land to plan area ratio for the subject property is quite low at 2.0 to 1. In this case, they do have a decent loading court, however, it does restrict any exterior site storage for a tenant that may need things of that nature. The description of the property begins on the page 1, further description on page 2, feel free to go through that. We have 17-foot clear height in the plant, 21-foot exterior wall height, and you can see the basics in terms of the rest of the building there. Photos begin on page 3. The office area is such as it is, somewhat dated. You can see the fit out of that space, and then you have the manufacturing component at the rear, and the shipping bays and loading court. So that is the property that we're looking at. Location is shown on page number 8. St. Boniface Industrial Park is an interesting beast in that it does tend to have lesser interest in the marketplace. This is shown by the prices paid for land in that area. We don't have any of that today, but if you look at the sale prices of land that have occurred in that industrial park, they're typically lower than in more greater demand areas. Obviously, this is based on demand for that area and what ultimately they'll be able to lease the properties for. So let's move on. Is $6 appropriate? Page number 11, I think we've got pretty strong support here that $6 is a fair rent. We have leases between that 2016 and 2018 timeframe, all current, all of a relatively significant size, similar in vintage for the most part, and significant wall height, all generally in that same 18, 19, 20, 21 exterior wall height. You can see that our rents range from a low of $4.85, but typically in that $5 to $6 a square foot range. These are investment properties. Some of them are multi-tenant. One or two are single tenant occupants. The ones in close proximity, you can see 214 Debates, $6 a square foot in 2017. 24 Debates, 88 building, 20-foot wall height, $6 a square foot in 2017. I think there's adequate evidence that $6 is appropriate. We've used a $5 market vacancy in reflection of the actual market vacancy as shown by the Johnson Report stats at the top of page number 12. We have overall industrial vacancy at the top, which is inclusive of owner occupants. Then we have investment vacancy, single tenant investment, and multi-tenant investment. All of those are in and around that 6 to 8% range. both on a point in time and 5-year average. We have gone with 5% as far as our vacancy. I think we're being quite reasonable in that. Our expense allowance remains the same in that we're asking for the 5 and the 2% in the expense allowance overall. Happy to answer questions on it. The shortfall allowance is the same as the city's. And I am going to make a slight adjustment in our capitalization rate for the subject property in looking at the recent term of the lease, signed just before the valuation date, good covenant, despite the fact we've got a lower land to plan area ratio, et cetera. Probably should be slightly lower than what I was at. And I'm going to use a 6.75% cap rate, which will give us a final market value of $3,458,000.
2,000,000
458, 459, pardon me, 459.
Take care.
I can't read my own writing. And that is my presentation, thank you.
I thank you, Mr. Smith. Trish, questions of the applicant?
Page 11,
No.
index 1 and 9 are the same.
Yes, you are correct, I'm sorry, that's
And
Yeah,
index
that's
5
correct.
and 7 are also the same.
yes, indeed they are. Thank you for catching that. So let's reduce our number down to 7 rather than 9.
Index 4 is significantly smaller than
It
the
is.
subject property.
That's correct.
Index 6 at
Index
10,000.
6 is also smaller.
Small, not really comparable to the subject.
In that way, no, it's a multi-tenant, generally smaller bay property. That's a tenant with multi-bays. Generally have a higher rental rate for the smaller area.
Can you just explain why you use the 5% vacancy as opposed to the overall industrial vacancy of 3%?
Yeah, absolutely. So in looking at page number 12, this is a chart outlining the statistics at the valuation date from the Johnson report. Johnson report, of course, does a twice yearly study of rental rates and vacancy in the market for all the various categories. They do their work in the industrial sphere is the best of the work that they do generally with regard to vacancy. So the top section is overall industrial vacancy at 3%, both point in time and 5-year. That's inclusive of owner occupants. Investment vacancy overall, point in time and 5-year was 7.3%. Single tenant investment vacancy, that's what the subject is, 8.7 and 8%. So we're being conservative in applying the 5% vacancy allowance to the subject. I think, not sure what vacancy the city used, 2.5, so that in our experience, we don't really see vacancy of that low in the market.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Therian.
Yeah, I was interested in that vacancy. So is there any vacancy in that building at the moment?
No, and that's not the point.
No, I know the point you made, but
Yes,
I also
okay.
like to see what, because we always look at actuals.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to use a logic that goes with the actuals.
Right. So, no, there is no vacancy in the building, as it's a single-tenant building leased in the 2017 for the 5-year time frame. So, but the development of a market value, if you look at the theory both in assessment and in appraisal theory, as it's taught to us, is you do need to look at the property on an overall basis. So you look at it on a longer frame of time than just a single point, and all properties will experience vacancy at some point or another. So you make an allowance for that vacancy based on a 5 or a 10 or a 50-year time horizon that there will be vacancy in a typical property at some point. So we're simply applying a fair market vacancy in arriving at that value. So yes, there is no vacancy in the property at the moment. The other aspect to consider is it's a single tenant property, so if Kraus Global happens to go under or something, you have 100% vacancy in that property until it's released, which can take some time if they have to do some work to the property, etc.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre.
And I have no question.
I just have a couple. I see that, Mr. Smith, you're using, for the gross, you're using the actual rent.
Correct.
Okay, and the lease states that it's $6 a square feet.
Correct.
You had mentioned that there was some results from the board revision the last time, and you've taken this to the municipal board, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so, did the board reduce it, or what happened at that time?
They confirmed the value.
Okay, they confirmed the value, okay. And you were originally using the 7% cap rate, and you reduced it down to 6 3/4. And that is based on what factor?
Well, in looking at the subject property, we have a recent lease close to the valuation date, relatively strong tenancy in place. They're achieving a good rent from that tenant. We have applied standard market vacancy in our development of the market value, so there's no additional deduction to be made for it being a single tenant occupant, etc. We did make allowance for vacancy. It's a relatively recent building. Those are the main factors.
All right. Just offhand, I guess, looking at your page 14 in regards to cap rate, and the subject, I think, is it not in St. Boniface?
It is, yes.
Okay, so I don't see any comparables in here in St. Boniface
For the lease?
for cap rates.
Oh, you are correct, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
So-
We did not have,
Okay.
well, we have debates at 7.4%,
Okay.
which is your second one there.
And it'd be nice, it'd be nice to know, I guess, the only thing I can go by for looking at the values, we don't have any square footage.
Sure, I've got it right here.
Okay.
What would you like to know?
Well, I'm just suggesting which one is close to the subject. I guess the subject's close to 46,000 square feet.
In terms of the size?
Yeah, I'm just looking at dollar value and thinking they might be similar in regards to square footage. Okay, so
enough.
you take like Century's close, I would say. So how many square feet are in there?
The Century.
Yeah, that's number one.
So,
You don't have that, right?
Of course, I have all of the other
Okay.
ones except for Century, so.
Okay.
Debates is.
Debates?
Debates is just over 32,000 square feet.
32.
Built
Okay.
in 80 through 2001.
Okay. And what about Hutchings?
Hutchings is just over 30,000 square feet.
Okay, 30,000. And how about Waverly? Just offhand.
Hutchings was built in the late 80s. The Waverly property, that is, we're only been given authorization to disclose the information that
Okay.
we have on that
So
one.
no sense looking at Logan because it's smaller.
It is indeed,
Yeah.
and a different location.
Okay. Okay. So it would have been, you know, I look for ideal stuff, but you look and look and you know, you can't find and you just deal with what you have.
Correct.
Okay.
So I would point you towards the debates and Hutchings perhaps as being the most indicative.
Okay.
But again, we would have different rental
Okay.
rates, et cetera.
I'm not gonna pursue the fact that you weren't happy with the decision and, you know, you took it to the municipal. I won't bother because it's a different, if it's a different year, et cetera.
It's a different time frame. We were in disagreement, we've appealed, we await scheduling.
All right. I think that is about it, yes. Summation?
No,
Mr. Smith, summation?
No, thank you.
We're going to take a 5-minute break, okay? So, we'll just shut down everything and you can exercise your legs and,
I
yeah.
was just gonna ask.
Okay, we'll call the meeting, for the hearing back to order, and we're going to go to 1436, I think it's Chevy Boulevard. So you can take us through this property.
File number 19-945, roll number 03066053800. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $2,261,000. And I have a recommendation for this property. I've handed out revised workups. So the recommendation is to reduce the rent from $5.47 to $4.09. And to increase the cap from 8.2% to 8.75%. For a value of $1,574,000.
All right, thank you. Mr. Smith?
We are in agreement with the market value.
Okay. Any questions, town members?
Not for me, thank you, Mr.
I have no
Chairman.
questions.
Okay.
got to make a decision.
I have this piece here. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we'll go to number 10A Higgins Avenue, whenever you're ready.
File number 19-1598, roll number 13091576500. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $275,000. And I have a recommendation on the workout I've just passed out, workup, pardon me. reducing the rent from $4.58 to $3.99. And increasing the cap rate from 8.6 to 9.3 for a reduced value of $220,000.
Mr. Smith?
We're in agreement on the market value.
Okay. Panel members, any questions?
Thank you for me, Mr. Chairman, none?
All right, no question.
McIntyre? Okay. We'll go to Logan Avenue, 2008. Whenever you're ready.
File number 19-1521, roll number 0756-901-0000. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $1,540,000. This, I have a recommendation for this also. So this property is owned by West End Radiators. We had it classified as a vehicle service garage. However, it does not have any of the correct characteristics of a vehicle service garage. So we have changed it to a storage warehouse, which changes the parameters in our model. So as you can see on the recommendation side, the rate, the model rate has been reduced to $9.18. The vacancy has increased to 6%. The shortfall rate has changed from $4.50 to $3.75. And the cap rate has changed from 8% to 6.5%. For a new value of $1,240,000.
Mr. Smith?
This is one where we're still in disagreement on some
Alright.
matters.
You may continue then.
Okay, this was built in 2002, wall heights of 21 feet, zoned M1, and has a land to plan area of 1.93. This is owner occupied, so there are no subject leases in place, and there's no history of sales on the property. On page 3, you can see some exterior photographs of the subject, and on page 5, you can see an overhead view. Page 6, the income workup is revised to the one I handed out. Again, that's 9,790 square feet at a rate of $9.18, 6% vacancy, $3.75 shortfall rate, 2% expenses, and a cap of 6.5%, bringing us to our value of $1,240,000. I'm not gonna go through my rent comparables because they were supporting the previous value as a vehicle service garage, so they are higher. They don't support the new rent at $9.18. So that is my evidence. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, questions?
Just with regard to the capitalization rate, so the new cap rate applied to the property is 6.5%.
Yeah,
And so when I look at the industrial section of the chart on page 5 there, it's all each of the categories is the same in terms of the high and the low. 20th to 80th is 6.34 at the 20th percentile. So the subject, is this largely age related in terms of the cap rate being driven by the relative newness of it?
yes. I
Okay.
believe so.
Those are all of my questions.
I thank you. Mr. Therian?
Yeah, on the vacancy of 6%, that would be a model?
Yes, and
That
that-
was used for
Yeah.
that type of building?
It's that area, the market region,
Okay.
that market region has 6% vacancy. in the
Okay.
model.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre?
And I have no questions.
There is, why was it classified as a service garage? I'm just looking at the picture of the subject. Is that the way it was classified the first time?
I believe so. I think that whoever put it on the roll initially, as I believe that they were the builders as well, the owners, they assumed it was a vehicle service garage.
So, but it looks like a service garage.
That's right.
But it doesn't, and it's classified now as a storage warehouse?
Storage warehouse, yeah. It just came to my attention,
Yeah.
that it does not, it doesn't have floor grates or any vehicle hoists.
Oh, it doesn't?
It does not.
Oh, okay. I just see, it almost looks like it from the picture, and like there's 3 sort of bays, eh?
Yeah.
It is quite big, eh? Almost,
It's
almost 10,000 square feet, yeah. So, I'm just, so does the cap rate change that much from one to the other?
It does, yeah. So all I did was change the classification, like the building type, and that's what the model produced.
So you didn't have, because of your changing, you never had any rents for storage warehouses?
Right.
Okay. All right, Mr. Smith, I think your presentation.
Okay, thank you. So, yes, it had been classified as vehicle service garage in the past, and we had gone through this exercise previously with other assessors. So I thank Ms. Caldwell for catching that in this cycle. And we had thought it was going to get corrected, I guess, but anyway, we're here now, so it's done. That's great. It is not a vehicle service garage, it's a radiator manufacturer, essentially. Yes, they have the bay doors that you can drive the truck into, but they don't install the components or do any work on vehicles there. They create the radiators and the radiator components themselves in that property. So it is owner occupied, and it's a manufacturer essentially. So if you look at my page number 1, you can see in the 2018 assessment, we were able to reduce the assessment from $1,338,000 to $929,000. That's for 2018. Bit of further text for you. There's description there with regard to the CMVSR being the wrong category, etc. So we're on track with that now. That's great. The age of the property, built in 2002, that's fine. It is of that vintage and of the structure that you would get built at that time frame. That's one component of value, right? Certainly in industrial, there's the element of maintenance issues and structural issues catching up over time. So if you have a 1954 building, it may have the same utility, if it has the same ceiling height and loading bays and all of those things. It may have the same utility but have more costs, etc. So if you have a newer building, you don't necessarily have those. However, that is a single item. Location is an enormous factor in terms of value. And if we look at the subject property, I'll take you to my page number 8. We are on West Logan here. Unfortunately, I see that we didn't include any street elevations. This would be the only property in that neighborhood of a 2002 vintage. That's because the owner was able to acquire relatively inexpensive land and build their property for their own use. For their business, manufacturing radiators and radiator components, largely for large vehicles, so trucks. For them, being in close proximity to Oak Point Highway was important, and that's why they built a building in 2002 where they did on West Logan. It certainly stands out. It's unusual. If you look anywhere around this, the buildings are of the 60s vintage with low ceiling heights and in disrepair. So the area itself does not demand higher rents, nor is it an area of investment by investors purchasing industrial properties, essentially. So what you have is kind of a one-off situation. So let's look at the photos. They begin on page 3, a couple of exteriors. You can see the yard and the elevation. Then we get into the facility itself. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward, steel frame, and you can see the heavy use that they make of the facility itself, and the basic nature of the service area for any clients that come in at the front and the office as well. So concrete block, tile flooring, pretty straightforward. So while it's of a 2002 vintage, that's not going to, in the market, drive significantly higher value. So let's look at value. I think we're somewhat higher than the city in the rental rate that we applied at $950 overall, so I'm not going to go through that in detail. The information is there for you to see. We have some auto repair information, and beyond that, and we're not considering it an auto repair place, but just for comparative purposes, if it were to be decided, if the city had moved forward with it as a CMVSR, we wanted to have auto-related information available to the panel, so you can see the range they fall in that kind of 9 to 11 dominantly range. Then we have industrial rates beginning at the bottom of page 11. These are newer properties for the most part, with strong rental rates, and we're in that 9 to 9.50 rental rate area. So we have used a rental rate of $9.50 a square foot for the subject. The city has come in slightly lower. Our vacancy that we applied, we went with 4% for the subject, simply reflecting the owner occupancy nature of it, and we were addressing some of the value in the capitalization rate that we've used for the property. So our expense allowance remains the same at 5% and 2%. The shortfall is the same, and we can move on to cap rate. So again, location is critical. You're in an area of aging industrial properties, substandard, not an area that's receiving redevelopment generally, aside from the subject itself, so it really stands out. It's not an area that investors are focused on in any fashion. For the most part, there are owner occupants in that area. If we look at the capitalization rate information that we present in our page number 15, obviously we've spoken numerous times about the market evidence from Colliers and CBRE, 7.25% being their top end. That's a relatively narrow snapshot. The ranges that they provide, they're looking at quality investment grade property. This would not be that. It would fall outside of that range. You're in an aging area with low demand. If you were to put this on the market, you would be seeking a bit of a needle in a haystack for somebody wanting to be located in a property of this size in that location, and willing to pay any kind of premium for a property that is recently built. I just don't see it in that market itself. So our comps again are at the top of page 15, 7.5% for investment grade properties being roughly our top end, one obviously higher at over 8%. Looking at the subject, its size, its age, location, its ability to be re-tenanted, etc. We've applied a strong rental rate, I would say, at $9.50 a square foot. I think we're certainly somewhat aggressively high in applying that to the subject. The 8% cap rate that we've applied is certainly fair for the subject. If you look at the area, one thing I didn't mention with the subject is they have very low site size. It is under half an acre. Land to plan area ratio 1.93 to 1. If you look at the site plan on page number 7, the parking and the exterior yard is very minimal. You have to have the circulation space for any clients to drive their vehicles, large trucks generally, into those bays in order to have the radiator components scanned or determined or whatever they do with them. So you've got very little space for any external storage, so any purchaser as an owner occupant would take that into account too. So we have applied a cap rate of 8% in our analysis, which gives us our final market value of $1,016,000. If you look at the prior history, you can see the city's original 2020 valuation and the 2018 value beside that with 8 and 8.25. I think 8% is certainly well supported for the subject. Thank you.
I thank you. Questions of the applicant?
Page 15, you have a shortfall amount of $4.50.
Yes, I did.
Is that why 450 as opposed to 375?
As opposed to the 375. I believe the city's shortfall rate was 450, and I must have looked at their expenses and over time and agreeing to that value.
Well, I think that was the original.
Yeah, as the vehicle
So that's why you
service
followed through with that.
Yeah, I did think I must have looked at the expenses too for it to feel appropriate as well, because I know it's a little bit higher at 450. So we had total expenses of $78,453 in the 2017 year, 10,000 square feet, so that would be over 450 a square foot.
index number 6, the one on Logan, do you have any idea what age? or
I do.
size?
Yeah, it's a little over 21,000 square feet, built in 69. That was with a strong tenant, signed up just before the sale date.
So why not closer to 7% cap rate?
Well, we're looking at different buildings, or rather properties and locations as well. That's located on the west side of Route 90 there. It's surrounded by newer flex warehouse space, and they have a quality tenant on a long-term basis there, which I don't think that you would achieve in the subject.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Therian.
Yeah, I concentrated on the cap rate because the net income is basically the same. But some comments you've made that sort of, not too sure how that supports the 8%. I understand that you mentioned location was critical. I understand that. On the other hand, you did mention that the purchaser purchased land at a low land value. It's on West Logan, close to the Old Point highway.
Yeah.
And they're in rads, these guys, so, would there be any walk-up business going to that, or that would be mostly to service the people on Oak Point?
That was
But I'm tying that into location, you understand what I'm saying?
No, absolutely. And I would stress that we need to separate business from the real estate. So they chose to locate there for their particular business to be close by the trucking locations on the Oak Point stretch, which are changing as well. They're not, some of them are leaving that area and going to the Centerport and locations such as that for better access, even than they had on Oak Point. So for their business, it made sense for them to locate there. There's some shift in that market, and again, we're not valuing their value in use for them. We're valuing the value of the realty itself as pardon me, as the fee simple ownership. I'm sorry, losing my terminology here. Fee simple ownership. We're not valuing the value to them as to operate their business in proximity to their clientele. I just don't think that you would easily plug another occupant tenant in here at $9.50 a square foot in this location.
I was also looking at on that point, because that's all I'm concentrating on at the moment, on your page 12. They're all basically older buildings, and unless I'm not looking at the right place for the cap. Maybe not, eh?
Nope.
No, I'm at the wrong spot. So where's your cap rate? I guess I'm losing it too.
Page 50.
50?
I think either of us is really losing it. We're just tired at this
Yeah.
point. So.
No, well, okay. So that's where well, that's why I wasn't looking at the right spot. I'm sorry. So those are, sale date, okay. Okay, I'll look at this after. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank
I'm
you.
sorry about that.
That's okay. Mr. McIntyre.
No, my only question was about comparable number 6 on page 15, and it's been answered.
I have no questions. Summation, either party?
No.
Mr. Smith?
No, thank you.
Okay. Okay. We'll go on to the last one on the docket, which is Queen Crescent, number 180, whenever you're ready.
File number 19-964, roll number 07080323-500. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $3,481,000. This is a partially owner-occupied storage warehouse manufacturing property, 1 and 2 stories with effective year built of 1996, wall heights 11 and 21. It's zoned M2 and has a land to plan area of 3.60. You'll see some exterior photographs of the property on page 3 and 4, and some overhead views on page 5. On page 7, the income workup. Oh, I have a recommendation on this one. Sorry. I didn't mark it on the front, so I apologize.
Do you have a handout for us?
I don't.
No,
I don't.
okay. Okay.
Sorry. Okay, but I'll take you anyways to page 7. I'll just show you the difference
Okay.
in the income workup. So what we're doing is changing the overall cap rate from 7% to 7.5%.
7.5, yeah.
For a new value of $3,249,000.
And what's your NOI offhand?
It remains the same. Yeah,
Same?
Yeah,
Okay,
243.60.
you're just changing the cap rate?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Smith?
We are in agreement.
All right. Panel members, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, none.
I have no questions.
Okay. I think that concludes the business, so Mr. Smith, thank you for your presentations and the results, the balance will be coming shortly.
Thank you.
And Trish, thank you very kindly.
Thank you.
And that concludes our hearing.